Good morning, Home Secretary. Thank you for joining us. Before we turn to the announcements that you want to make on immigration, can we spend a moment on the revelations about the BBC? Lord Dyson, the Duke of Cambridge, the Duke of Sussex, and now many of the BBC's own journalists have called the national broadcaster's integrity into question. Do you personally trust the BBC?
Well, I think it's important to recognise the criticism and the deep concern associated with the report that was published by Lord Dayton. The BBC itself, one of our great institutions, its reputation has been compromised. It's being questioned right now. And they themselves will have to reflect upon the report and spend a great deal of time, I think, really looking at how they can regain and rebuild trust and confidence. Confidence and trust of the British public, but also they are a world-class institution. So they will have a great deal of work to do in this particular area. And of course, right now, it's a very, very important time for the BBC to very much look at itself and learn some very important and significant lessons post the publication of this report.
But the word I'm not hearing in answer to my question, do you personally trust the BBC, is yes. Can you say yes?
Well, absolutely. At this stage, we are focused, and even from a personal perspective, I'm very conscious of the hurt, the damage that this report has highlighted. And on that basis, Trevor, you've already heard me say, I think the reputation of the BBC has been compromised. There's no question about that. Trust and confidence has been undermined. And now is the time for the BBC to absolutely reflect upon the findings of this report and rebuild that trust and confidence.
I'm hearing a no there, and I'm wondering if what that means is that you think that the BBC cannot go on marking its own homework after Jimmy Savile, after Cliff Richard, now after this thing. Do you think, like, for example, Lord Grade, that we need some new way of holding the corporation to account? For example, he's proposed a new board of editorial policy composed of experienced independent journalists.
Well, I think there will be a review point, Trevor. Next year is an opportunity when it comes to the mid-term review of the BBC Charter for government and the BBC to absolutely look at new ways of governance of the institution, the organisation that is the BBC. So my colleagues, I know the Culture Secretary in particular, will be working with the BBC to very much use that moment as an opportunity, and I say this as an opportunity, to review governance and accountability structures. And post this report, that's going to be a very, very important moment.
Some of this does come into your wheelhouse, doesn't it? The Metropolitan Police are saying that though they looked at this in March, the Dyson report has caused them to look at the situation again. Do you rule out the possibility of criminal prosecutions?
Well, Trevor, it's not for me at this early stage to even speculate and comment on anything of that nature. Clearly, investigations, if they are taking place, that has to go through the process. But fundamentally right now, I come back to very much from a government perspective, there will be an opportunity specifically on the governance of the BBC, where there will be an opportunity not only for reflection, but an opportunity to look at governance reforms and how effectively accountability and governance can be strengthened. There will be a very, very significant moment now, there's no question about this, where lessons have to be learned. Yes, within the BBC itself, yes, with the leadership of the BBC, its journalists and people that work for the BBC too, but ultimately the governance and accountability that ultimately would lead to public trust, public confidence in the way in which the BBC operates and the way in which it conducts its business.
But you talk about this being an early moment, and I understand that. But what I take you to be saying to the Metropolitan Police and its boss, Cressida Dick, that if they find a reason to proceed with any criminal prosecutions, there will be no pushback from the Home Office if that is their judgment.
Well, look, I'm not, Trevor. It's not for me to even contemplate or speculate anything in that.
I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm simply asking you.
I wouldn't.
I'm simply asking you to confirm what you've already said, I think.
Well, I think it's important right now to reflect upon findings of the report and any other information that comes out that is associated specifically with what has happened. And of course, if there is subsequent action that needs to be taken, then clearly, alongside the publication of this report, lessons being learned and changes to the institution, structure, governance, accountability, then that will follow. From a government perspective, I should just emphasise again, obviously, there'll be a mid-term review of the Charter next year, and my colleagues in government will absolutely ensure that that is used as the right opportunity, not just for reflection, but to enhance governance and accountability within the BBC.
OK, the BBC's on notice. Let's just have a quick word, if I may, on the vaccine situation. Public Health England say this morning that the vaccines we're using in Britain are effective against the Indian variant. Is that news that means that we can look forward to reopening on June the 21st?
Well, I think, Trevor, we should all really just look at the success of the vaccine programme and how that is gradually enabling us all to live our lives. The reopening of society, unlocking of aspects of our economy, clearly that's exactly what the roadmap is all about. And the Prime Minister himself has been clear that there are key tests and key stages in the run-up to the 21st of June. We will always continue to look at the data when it comes to the next stage of the roadmap. That is sensible, that is responsible. And I think we should absolutely just reflect upon the success of the vaccine and how that is giving people, individuals, society, businesses confidence to be back out there again. What is a very critical time, a year after lockdown and very tough decisions that have been made by the government. So maybe two cheers across the nation for that. Let's turn to an area for which you are directly responsible, and that is immigration. You and the Prime Minister regularly remind us that we now have control of our own borders. So why are you planning to spend time and resource on new legislation? Well, these are important changes, Trevor, around the UK's approach to immigration. And it is correct. The Prime Minister rightly, and I speak about, this is absolutely part of our manifesto commitments to take back control of our borders. And we've done that by ending free movement. That was part of leaving the EU, but also introducing a new points-based, a British points-based immigration system. That's one important aspect of legal migration, dealing with legal migration and how we have our rules in place, how we also support the brightest and the best to come to the United Kingdom to bolster our economy and support businesses in terms of their own economic growth. What I'm unveiling and proposing tomorrow is a new legal migration and borders strategy, which very much sets the framework for the future, which is based upon digitalisation of our borders, but also the simplification of our immigration laws. Currently, thus far, we've already simplified something like 21 immigration routes, and we're in the process of simplifying almost 500 pages of immigration legislation and rules. And there is so much more that we can do in this whole area, and that's effectively what I will be announcing tomorrow.
Home Secretary, I understand why you're focusing on simplification and technology and so on and so forth, but in what way will new electronic gates at airports stop boats crossing the Channel to Kent or people hiding in lorries?
Well, so Trevor, there are 2 points to make here, first of all. Digitalisation is absolutely important because we can upstream checks, we can do checks on individuals before they even arrive in our country. And that's important in terms of criminality.
People in the back of lorries are not presenting themselves to be checked.
I will come on to that in a minute. I'm also, when it comes to illegal migration, so the digitalisation is speaking about legal immigration. Illegal migration is a very, very important problem and issue for our country. It has been an issue for decades and decades, whether it's the back of lorries or people crossing the Channel in very, very dangerous circumstances, being facilitated by criminal gangs and people smugglers. I am introducing the new Borders Bill, which will come to Parliament next month, where we will specifically clamp down and tackle the problems around illegal migration. We are going to change our laws. We will have not just greater checks. We've already got very, very significant law enforcement operations taking place in France, in Belgium, upstream. And we're already prosecuting and arresting the people smugglers. Last Wednesday, I myself saw a number of arrests of people that had been trafficking and facilitating people.
Yeah.
But the key point to make, Trevor, is that when it comes to claiming asylum, and we are going to change our asylum laws and our asylum system because it's broken, people that are being smuggled, they should be claiming asylum in a safe country, the first safe country that they travel through. More often than not, these are EU member states, rather than taking the risk of coming to the United Kingdom. And so we are going to be proposing legislation. I've made the announcements already. We've published our new plan for immigration, which tackles this very issue, illegal migration, people trafficking.
OK, Home Secretary, let's get this in perspective. Since the beginning of the year, I think that you have deported something like 700 foreign criminals. But according to the Pew Research Organisation, there are something like 800,000 to 1 million undocumented migrants in this country. And that, I think, is probably what most people are worried about, how you deal with that. And the proposals you make don't address that at all. And let's take a case in point. 10 days ago, in Glasgow, the Borders Agency, Border Force, attempted to remove 2 Indian men from Pollock Shields because they'd overstayed their visas. A large crowd gathered. They blocked the road, completely peacefully, by the way, I should say. And in the end, the Border Force gave up. And the men are still here. What are you going to do about that?
Well, Trevor, you're exactly making the case as to why we need to reform our immigration system.
But the reform you're proposing has nothing to do with this.
It actually does. So the reforms I'm proposing cover legal migration and illegal migration. So you mentioned, for example, the number of people, foreign national offenders. These are high-harm criminals, people that have committed all sorts of atrocities against British citizens in the United Kingdom. Yeah. We will continue to remove those individuals. And in fact, many of the part of the proposals that I am bringing forward will make it easier for us to remove foreign national offenders. So we will stream. So if I may,
explain to me what you are going to do about the 2 gentlemen in Pollock Shields.
I will in just a minute. So we will also be changing many of the appeals processes where individuals go to court again and again and again to thwart our ability as a government to remove high-harm individuals or people that have overstayed their right to be in the country or who have come to the United Kingdom illegally. So immigration enforcement, and not Border Force, it's immigration enforcement in Glasgow, they were stopped from removing 2 people that had no legal basis to be in the United Kingdom. They were doing their job. The protesters stopped that from happening in terms of the removing those 2 individuals. There is a whole process around the removal of people that should not be in this country at all, people that are here illegally. So we will continue to strengthen our laws to enable the government to remove people with no legal basis to be here. That includes foreign national offenders and criminals and people that have come here illegally.
You're going to have another go at removing these gentlemen. What do you think the First Minister is going to say? Because 10 days ago, she tweeted, the Home Office needs to ask itself hard questions after today. Doing this on Eid in the heart of our Muslim community and in the midst of a serious COVID outbreak was staggeringly irresponsible, but the even deeper problem is an appalling asylum and immigration policy. Are you going to confront Nicola Sturgeon on this question?
Well, the point about our immigration policy, immigration is a reserved matter for the government here. And quite frankly, it's pretty clear that when it comes to the nationalists in Scotland, they would much rather have an immigration policy of open borders, no checks when it comes to criminals coming to the UK, and no border controls. And I think actually her comments also reflect upon the nationalist position when it comes to removing people that have no legal basis to be in the UK. This is nothing to do with Eid at all. Immigration enforcement are absolutely doing their job in terms of removing people with no legal basis to be in the UK. I think it's absolutely a sorry state of affairs that we see the nationalists in Scotland basically trying to thwart the safety and security of the British public, but also trying to prevent the British government from removing those with no legal basis to be in the United Kingdom. This is, Trevor, exactly the reason why we are changing our laws and bringing in new legislation so that the government can remove people that should not be in our country while protecting the safety and security of British citizens through the legal routes and the digitalisation that I'm proposing.
I look forward to returning to this with you, Home Secretary. But before we finish, can I briefly return to a topic that's very much on your in tray, and that is the Windrush Compensation Scheme, where the Home Office has reported that 21 individuals have died before their cases could be processed. You also predicted that you should have paid out at least £120 million to victims of this scandal by the end of March this year. In fact, you've only paid out around £14 million. Do you feel in any way ashamed at the way your department has treated these people?
Well, I think, first of all, Trevor, when it comes to the Windrush scandal, and it was a scandal, there is a very, very significant report published by Wendy Williams, and based on the lessons learned from that scandal, we're actually implementing the recommendations from Wendy and the changes that she put forward, and that report came out last March. I've been clear to my department that those reforms are coming, they're in place, but you specifically asked about the compensation scheme. Now, it is
what I asked about was how you felt. Did you feel ashamed about what has happened?
Windrush scandal has been an absolute stain, quite frankly, on our country, but also on what has happened in the Home Office. I've been very public about that, and I will reiterate that and I'll restate that, but it doesn't mean that we ignore what has happened. So there have been a whole range of changes that have taken place, but you specifically asked about compensation. Now, first of all, the compensation scheme was designed in consultation with members of the Windrush community and the generation themselves, members of that generation. In December, so just 5 months ago, because the scheme was simply too slow and complicated in terms of bringing forward payments, I overhauled the scheme. So in the last 5 months, we have seen over £26 million of payments being put out. But also at the same time, in March, less than 2 months ago, we had our highest month where £8 million of compensation was paid out. Now, the changes to the scheme have been brought in place in conjunction with the Windrush Stakeholder Advisory Group. And I do actually want to thank everybody, because these are members of the community that have worked with me and with my department to find faster ways of streamlining payments and getting money out. But, Trevor, there is a lot more work to do here. There really is. I've been very vocal about this, and it's right that we work night and day to fix not just the compensation and get the money out, but also many of the problems that led to people involved in the Satchel scandal.
I get that, Home Secretary, and I hope we will have more opportunities to talk about this again. Thank you very much for your time this morning.